above me in the razor wire, I heard a sparrow chirping. And yeah, and I tell people like probably been chirping my whole prison term. I did not hear it, but that day I heard it. And that day is where prison did not feel like a place of like cold, harsh ugliness. It became like, a place where I could connect with other human beings, see them as like they're on their journey, I'm on my journey. Many of them further along, some of them still lost and lonely, but we were all on our journey. And that's where my process of transformation began.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to episode 2 of Take the Next Step. I am your host, Ryan Sterling. In this podcast, it's my job to interview someone who's taken some sort of personal growth journey and to dissect that journey one step at a time. Because when you think about it, any sort of journey is really just an accumulation of steps. Today, I'm super excited to have my friend Quan Huynh on the podcast. When you look at Quan today, you see a really successful guy. He is a business owner. He's actually about to hire 28 employees, even during these really challenging times. He's an executive at this nonprofit called Defy Ventures, where they help prison inmates integrate back into society through entrepreneurship. And as of today, Quan is now a published author. His book, Sparrow in the Razor Wire, is available today on Amazon, and I encourage everyone to pick up a copy. I've read it already, and it is an amazing story. I seriously could not put it down. So again, when you look at Quan today, he, again, successful business owner, executive at a nonprofit, now a published author. But it wasn't always this way. Quan had a pretty rough upbringing. He was part of a Vietnamese family that was displaced immediately following the Vietnam War. He found himself in a place where he experienced racism and bullying. On top of that, his father passed away at a young age. And the next couple of years after his father's death was really a downward spiral where a series of events led him to juvenile hall and ultimately led him to serving a life sentence for murder. He thought he was going to spend the rest of his life behind bars, and it was in prison when he learned self-acceptance, learned how to take accountability, and he experienced inner freedom for the very first time. It's an incredible tale. Quan's a really good storyteller, and I think you're going to enjoy this podcast. So with that, I'm going to leave it to Quan Huynh on the second episode of Take the Next Step.
We're basically in the process of staffing about 28 positions.
That's amazing. Good for you. Yeah. So you had the business is thriving. You've got the book coming out in a couple weeks. So talk about that, and what are you doing for this book launch?
It is a couple weeks, huh?
Actually, by the time this is released, it's probably going to be your launch week, man. So hopefully we can get you started on the right foot. But I have to say, man, it's an amazing book. I've read the chapters you've released, and I mean, it's a page turner, man. It is you're a really good writer, and it's very cinematic. So what are you doing? Are you doing more podcasts? Are you doing some press?
Yeah, we got some podcasts. It was funny because you didn't mean, but he's also in the Guided Author. We were in Austin together. John Briggs. We just became fast friends there. We always kept in touch. So he had asked for the PDF of the book when I had submitted to Scribe. I sent it to him. He gives it to some guy out of New York who is like, John's like, man, this is probably the most connected guy I know. So it's a guy named Stephen Cohen out of New York. So Stephen calls me and just tells me, man, I don't read books, let alone read stuff on a phone. I read your whole book. I love this. I want to help you. Like, what can I do to help you with this? So he connected me to, I'm supposed to be doing a podcast with Cal Fussman in a couple weeks. Yeah, and
you know about Stephen Cohen, the hedge fund manager?
I guess. I just know him about New York. Yeah.
That's amazing. Wow. Okay. So Cal Fussman, that's a big one.
Yeah. Like, I'm excited on that. But then I just look at his stuff like, oh, wow, he's interviewed some other stuff. So then Steven goes, oh, well, who else do you want to talk to? Like, I don't know. And he goes, well, just aim, like, the sky's the limit, Quan. Tell me who
Totally.
you want. I'll tell you if I can get there. I said, okay, well, what about Tim Ferriss? He's gone into prison. He goes, Tim Ferriss, oh, he's a great friend of Kyle Fussman. Yeah, we could probably get on. And I go, okay, well, while you're at it, what about Joe Rogan too? He goes, Rogan, I know Rogan. You know what? I think I could get you on Rogan. Let me work on this. So I don't know.
All I can say is I'm glad I'm getting you right now because you're going to get very busy in the next couple of months. So that's awesome, man. I'm super happy for you. I'm super excited to talk more about this book and this upcoming discussion here. But then the last thing is, just want to hear about your business owner. You got a book coming out. And then the last thing, your role with Defy Ventures. Can you talk about that for a couple of minutes?
Yeah, I am the senior post-release program manager for Defy Ventures. So for your listeners that don't know, Defy Ventures is a nonprofit. We help men and women with criminal histories to basically transform their lives through the journey of entrepreneurship. We go in with about 40 or 50 entrepreneurs. The program's called the CEO of Your New Life, and it culminates in them doing a business pitch competition, and it's judged Shark Tank style with about 40 or 50 other volunteers on the streets. Of course, with COVID now, we can't go into the prisons. Yeah. My job is to help these men and women after they come home in their reentry process. So now they've gone through our program, and now this is where the rubber hits the road. So whether that's connecting them with employment partnerships, resources, and referrals for housing, for basic documents. Sometimes they come home, and the other flip side of it is I'm tasked with nurturing and building relationships with other volunteers in our community to basically build a supportive community, whether that's to support them in doing workshops. We do workshops on technology basics. Sometimes they've been gone 15, 20, 25 years. They don't know how to send a text message or what a screenshot is, let alone Google Docs and the whole cloud. So we do workshops on that, networking, entrepreneurship, of course, and then community. So so we built a whole ecosystem of a supportive community out here to help our men and women that are coming home to be successful. Man. The program is working. Yeah.
I would love to help at some point. I mean, I think what you guys are doing is fantastic and so needed. I mean, it's amazing to think about what we need: prison reform and also, helping people get integrated back into society. I think entrepreneurship is a great way to do it. But it's amazing to see what we do to people who have criminal pasts. Like, yes, people messed up, but we all messed up. And imagine if you are known for the rest of your life for the biggest mistake that you've ever made. And prevents you from getting a PPP loan. It prevents you from voting. It prevents you from getting certain jobs. It's one of those things where we need, if people are rehabilitated, we need to allow people to be rehabilitated and come back in society and be thriving members. Because, I mean, I have to imagine that the number of people that go right back to prison is probably pretty high.
Yeah, some studies, so the numbers are always unclear, but like some studies have it as high as 2 out of 3 people releasing out of prison will go back within 3 years.
Yeah.
That's why we're like absolutely proud of our numbers at Defy. At the 1-year mark, our recidivism numbers, or the rate at return to prison, is about 7.2% right now.
That's amazing.
About at least 50, yeah.
So a typical person that's released, 70% are going to go back within the next 3 years.
Within the next 3 on some of the studies, for most of it, because it depends on is it state or is it back to the county jail or is it going back to the prison? So depending on how they're running those numbers, but our recidivism numbers of going back to prison runs at 7.2% where at the 1-year mark, whereas a regular person that comes home that hasn't had opportunity to do much programming goes back to prison at about 50% at the 1-year mark. Once things open up, I'd love to bring you into prison with us.
Yeah, man.
Meet amazing hustlers and entrepreneurs in there.
Yeah, for sure. I would love it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just look at where you are right now, man. I mean, you're a business owner, a thriving business, even during these COVID times. You have an amazing book that's coming out. You're being introduced to some of the wealthiest and most connected people in the world right now because of your story and people that want you to tell your story. And you're a senior member of this nonprofit. But your life wasn't always amazing, right? So let's take it back to what it was like. Let's go all the way back.
Sure. Let me see. I'm Vietnamese refugee. We came here to the United States under asylum back when my family we lost our country. So I was maybe several months old, and we settled in Provo, Utah.
This was immediately after the Vietnam War.
Yes, right after the Vietnam War. My father was involved with the military. My several of my family members were involved with the Department of Defense. So we fortunately got to leave the country before it was before the fall of Saigon. But we settled. Most of my family settled here in California. My father had actually come to the United States before that to train with the American Special Forces, and so he knew the geography. And my mother had never seen snow, so my father said, "You know what? Let's settle in Utah."
So you thought it was just random?
Right. It was just random. It was just because the sponsorship list for everyone wanted to go to California, so it took a little bit longer to get a sponsor. I think they were waiting in the Philippines or something to get a sponsor. My dad put Provo, Utah, and from what they told me when I was growing up, we were at the top of the list, and my mom got to see snow for the first time.
So your earliest memories are in Provo, Utah, then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Provo, Utah, like the mountains, the wide, the snow, yeah.
And so what was it like growing up as a young Vietnamese boy, just immediately after the Vietnam War in Provo, Utah? Was there a thriving Vietnamese community?
No, we were the only Vietnamese family there at first. My father created the Vietnamese Refugee Association after that, and he started helping other Vietnamese refugees adjust to their new homeland, like throughout neighboring states. So I remember as a little boy, I would go with him to Colorado, Wyoming, Nevada, like just wherever there were Vietnamese families, and he would help them with like filling out paperwork for Social Security, the DMV, anything and everything. And as a little boy, I didn't understand. I was like, "What are you doing? This?" We just be on the road, and I asked him, and he doesn't get paid. Like he told me, "No, I don't get paid for this," and I didn't understand why he would do something like this.
Wow.
It wasn't until years later, but I did experience.
So what did he do for money?
Well, I guess he worked in the coal mines.
Okay.
So he worked in the coal mines of Price, and I think his first job was as a custodian. I know that he worked as a custodian at a nearby supermarket. So I know the first thing he bought when he got his paycheck was a bike, just so he'd get to work faster. And that was us as immigrants.
How was that though? Because I mean, it sounds like your dad was reasonably prominent in Vietnam, and all of a sudden you're coming over this new land, Provo, Utah, and he's a janitor. Did he ever complain? Did you ever?
I don't ever remember my dad complaining anything like that. He just did his thing. I mean, but once he created the Vietnamese Refugees Association, and then suddenly he was on the news all the time. We had senators, and we had like government dignitaries at my house. I mean, he went to the military academy in South Vietnam. So I remember as a little boy, these congressmen or whoever that used to come to our house, they used to tell me as a little boy, when you grow up, you're going to be the first Vietnamese American to go to West Point. You're going to be just like your father. So of course I was like, yeah, I want to be just like him. As a little kid, I was like, yeah, that's what I want to be. I used to look at the pictures of West Point, the gray uniforms, and I used to imagine, yeah, I want to go to West Point, and that's how I'm gonna make my dad proud.
So you're in elementary school. You're going, his dreams of going to West Point. So are you assimilating with all of the American kids?
Well, I think I try. I remember growing up, I always felt like, why does my family not look normal like other families? Why do kids make fun of me? And I experienced what I now know to be racism. Back then, I just thought like there's something wrong with me. But yeah, so there was that growing up. So I mean, the vast majority of the people in Utah are very kind and loving, but there were some very racist and violent people over there. So I remember seeing where I go to get gas with my uncle, and people would cuss at us, tell us go back to our country, get out of here. Yeah, so I remember all that as a little kid, and we got chased as little kids, we got beat up. Like one that I shared in my book was when my brother, I think him and I were just playing with our GI Joes in the creeks, and some other kids, some older kids actually told us to get out of there and go back to our country, but You know, they were on the other side of the fence, so we thought like, okay, we're gonna be brave and tell them make us, and they jumped the fence and chased us down, and then ended up beating my brother up, putting dirt in his mouth. And I stood there. That's my younger brother. I stood there and watched and cried. I didn't do anything. Then when I went home, I remember my dad just told me, you know what? That's your younger brother. That's your family. You have to protect your family at all costs. So I remember even that, like as a kid, like man, I messed up. I failed my brother. I failed my family. So then
Hmm.
I think that's where like the first chip on my shoulder of, you know what, I have to protect my family. I have to
Mm-hmm.
something wrong with me, and I have to prove everyone wrong,
Mm-hmm.
and not let anyone know that I feel there's something wrong with me. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
So how,
my dad gets diagnosed with leukemia when I was 8. Started going in and out of the hospital. So when his condition got worse, we decided to move out here to California, where his family lived. I guess to get closer to his family, and that's when we settled out here in Orange County, California.
you come to California. So on the one hand, your dad's sick, so that must be really hard to go through as an 8-year-old. But then you're moving to a place where you're around family, you're around a network. I'm assuming you're around more Vietnamese kids. So how was that transition?
But that was also difficult back then. I mean, when I first came here, we first came here, the vast majority of Vietnamese were immigrants. This was during the 80s, so those were a lot of them were fleeing the country, like the boatway people, because they were fleeing communism. A lot of them could not speak English well, and I could not speak Vietnamese well. So the kids at
Wow.
school teased me. They said I was whitewashed. They said, you know, who's this white kid? And so I just never felt like I really fit in either culture. I just grew up like that. And then also during that time, you know, I mean, we grew up Roman Catholic, and so my dad's in and out of the hospital, and somehow we just have to continue praying. And I'm thinking every time that my dad goes back in the hospital, somehow I'm responsible, or me, my brother and sister are responsible for not being good kids. And yeah, so it was just during that whole time we had our struggles.
So you experience racism from the white kids in Utah, but then you're considered not Vietnamese enough to the Vietnamese community in Orange County. And then you're also feeling this incredible responsibility to take care of your family, given the fact that you're the oldest son and your dad is sick. I mean, that's a lot. I mean, how old were you at this time?
Was he got sick when I was 8. We moved out here when I was 10. So by 11, 12, 13, he's going in and out of the hospital pretty regularly.
And how old were you when he passed away?
13. He passed
13.
away when I was 13. And now I understand this. The day that he passed away was on Mother's Day. It was also the day of our first communion, and leading up to it, I remember we had went to the hospital, and my mom, you know, who doesn't show much emotion, even to this day, that was probably one of the few times that I saw her cry, and she just said, "They said your father doesn't have much longer to live." And now, like speaking with my brother and sister about it, I think every single one of us were in denial in so many ways, and I just remember as a boy thinking, you know what, I'm going to save my dad by the very first time I get to eat the bread, I'm gonna pray, and that prayer, God's gonna grant it, and that's what's gonna happen. The morning of our first communion, I woke up and my younger sister tells me that my dad had passed away the night before. So, you know, that was devastating. And then partly in the back of my mind, I thought, you know, God killed my dad just so he would not have to grant this prayer. And I believed that. I believed that for a
Mm-hmm.
while. So that was like where I had rejected like my faith, rejected basically my mom and what she was talking about when she came, tried to bring us to church. It was just, yeah, just became disconnected after that.
A lot
So
to go through as a 13-year-old.
yeah. I mean, you know, just yeah. I look back now, like yeah, that was a lot to go through. I mean, I'm in my line of work. I get to see people that have experienced far worse. But for me, that at that time, that was devastating. And then coupled with every my own sense of like my issues with self-acceptance and identity.
Yeah.
So I gravitated towards kids that were already getting in trouble. And by the time I was 17, I was arrested for the first time.
What were you arrested for?
We were arrested for 3 attempted murders on some skinhead kids had called my house and threatened to kill my family, and my brother had told me about it. So at the time I was working at Subway, and um, he came in and told me like some like or these kids that we knew from a continuation school nearby had called and threatened my sister and my family, and he knew who it was. So by that time we carried like a little gun around. Like one of my friends, he had a gun, and that was like our little crew. We thought, okay, well, we have a gun, and everything out of our mouths at that time was, okay, well, we'll just go shoot up the house or we'll shoot them up. And it's just young male with a lot of testosterone just bragging and running their mouths. We'd never shot anybody before. So they told me they'll come back that night at 10 o'clock and pick me up. And then my coworker actually drew the map of where he lived. And so I gave them a map, and then they said, okay, we'll be back at 10 o'clock to pick you up tonight, and we'll go shoot at this house. I said, okay. So I got off at 10. They did not come back, so I went home, and I found out that they had actually went to a nearby arcade, found somebody else that knew those guys. He pointed out the house, and one of my other friends went up inside the house and shot 3 people inside. So we were all arrested.
You weren't at the house. Someone else. Did anyone die?
No. Fortunately, we all survived. But they arrested my brother. My brother was in the car. My friend ran up in the house and shot 3 people. And they said because I had asked my coworker for the map, that I was also part of the conspiracy. This was during the time of, the get tough on crime laws and just, so yeah, that was my first arrest. And
were you guys part of official Vietnamese gang, or was this just a small crew of?
It's just a small crew of kids. But when I went into juvenile hall and then to the county jail is where my gang ties and my criminality, became worse. And then suddenly I just got, suddenly I'm in there and everything in me feels, because in there, everything's my race. Whites on one side, blacks, Mexicans, Asians. So there I just feel, okay, I have to fit in with my people. And that's, I conformed and followed in their values, and I came out worse.
You were accepted though too.
Yeah. And then it fulfilled that part of me that's like, hey, I've never been accepted, and suddenly for once in my life, this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. And inside the gang, and that's where I felt fulfillment and meaning in a weird, twisted sense.
How long were you in juvenile hall?
That first arrest, about 2.5 years, right around there. Then I came home, still running with the gangs. I got violated a couple times after that. I think the last violation ended up doing 2 years straight on a gang and gun violation, and I got out in 1998. And then 1 year later, 1999. That's
real fast though. So 1998, you got out. So how old are you at that point?
The first arrest was 91. I was 17. 98, I was 24.
Yeah, so 24. Yeah, okay. So you're 24. So you've been in and out of juvenile hall, and are these county jails? Did you ever go to prison?
No, I went to the California Youth Authority, which is prison for adolescents. They used to house them. If they're under 25, there was an opportunity to house them. It's called the California Youth Authority, but those were referred to as gladiator schools because those are many times even worse than prison.
Yeah.
Like,
okay.
More violent, more the criminal and gang element is very prevalent inside the youth authorities at that time.
And then when you're out, you're running with the gangs.
Yeah. Well, there's a part of me that runs with the gang, but then it's like almost like a double life. The other part of me still wants to fulfill the part of me that wants to be successful. What does that mean? Me going to school and going to work and going to college.
When did the whole West Point dream fizzle out?
My junior year, we had moved out here to California. I took the SATs and I did terrible on it. And then that's when I go, I don't think I'm gonna make it to West Point. I remember the first time I even said I wanted to go to West Point. I think it was the beginning of my junior year. I was in the Model United Nations. There was this little group, Model United Nations. I was part of it, and all my peers were talking about certain schools they wanted to go to. They like everyone knew what they wanted to do, and so then they said, "What about you, Quan? What college do you think of going to?" I go, "I'm thinking of going to West Point." And the first time I said it, they all laughed at me. What, West Point? No way, you'll never get to West Point. And so I never spoke about that again. And then when I took the SATs and I realized there's no way I'm going to go to a good college or get any scholarship. I can't afford to go any. I mean, my grades weren't terrible, but they weren't fantastic. I was like 3.3 GPA or something. But I mean, or I had to work full time. So it wasn't like I had time to study, and I didn't do great on the SAT. So I realized I'm not going to get to West Point. So I remember I had filled out for the Reserve Officer Training School, ROTC or something, because I still always wanted to be in the military. I wanted to be an officer, and I remember I had filled out that card, and they had called home. My mom had picked up the phone, and she picked it up, and they said there's Reserve Officer Training, and she's like, no, we're not interested in this. My son's going to West Point. What are you doing calling? And trying to call up on him, you know. And I remember sitting there and not being able to tell her, like, there's no way I'm gonna make it to West Point. There's no way I could live up to this expectation.
And what was the time between when you gave up the dream of West Point and then got put away for the first time?
Less than a year. It was like
a year. Okay.
Yeah, right before I took that test, the SAT, right before summer of junior year, and then the following senior year is when I got arrested.
So that started to unravel pretty quickly, but then kind of going back to it, then going to juvenile hall, being institutionalized, that was the first time that you really felt acceptance, because now you were part of this community and this Vietnamese gang. And then for the rest of the next 7 years, you're in and out, but you're talking about this double life you were living. So what was this when you're not running with the gang? What's life like?
Well, I mean, I was in college, and then I was working, and in a weird sense, being in college and working also made me like inside the gang. Most of a lot of my homeboys in the gang weren't going to school or weren't going to work. So then suddenly I'm oh, he's so smart, he's working, you know. But I think it continued to feed into the shallow part of me that needed recognition, that needed some type of achievements for others to be impressed with me.
But at that point, when you're going to college, did you meet anyone? Were you joining any communities in college? Were you able to gain any sort of acceptance?
And when I just remember in college, like when people started talking about like their dreams and goals, it always made me very uncomfortable because I didn't have any tangible ones that I could pursue, and I didn't know, like most of them probably didn't have it either. Everyone was just speaking about their dreams, but I was afraid to, you know, speak about mine and be laughed at or something. So I didn't, and plus I didn't have any. There was always something at the back of my mind, like, okay, I'm a convicted felon. Even if I get this college degree, what if they run a background check? What if, you know, they don't hire me? But yet
so why was there part of you that felt you needed to go to college?
That's just my upbringing. I mean, even to this day, I mean, I don't have my college degree, and yet like my aunt, my mom was like, oh yeah, when are you gonna think of going back to get a college degree? I said, where am I gonna go? Let's say it's partly an Asian cultural thing, but I don't know. I think that's the easy go-to as part of, okay, well, yeah, a college degree somehow makes things right, and I don't know.
Is this something you'd ever consider doing?
Well, I mean, I actually was going to college up until about a year and a half, 2 years ago, but at the time I was working full time at the 5, running a company and writing the book. And I sat there, and then it was funny because one of the teachers gave me a D on a writing assignment. Said, are you kidding me? Like, you know what? What is this school going to do for me? Like, and so then I had this conversation with my mom, even like her and my aunt tried to talk to me about continuing. I said, listen, I don't think this is worth my time. I go, what am I going to do with this degree? I have a company. People get into a work. Yeah, it might be cool to say, yeah, I got a college degree, And I know, and I told him, I know, mom, that one of your dreams is always just to see me get my graduation diploma, and that's part of your narrative of
Totally.
how things are gonna. This is
Yeah.
now my son is finally successful, but I think I'm sorry, but this is not gonna happen.
This is a really interesting point. I want to put a pin in this because I think this is really interesting. And let's go back to your story. But coming to that realization, I think I think is a good point, and I think something that can help a lot of people. So let's just put a pin in that for a second. I want to come back to it because I think there's something that's really interesting there. So going back, so now you're 24 years old. You're out of this juvenile hall kind of
California Youth Authority.
youth authority, exactly, and you become kind of a full functioning member of society at this point.
Yeah.
You're still in the gang.
I was still. So by this time, I think like when I look back on each of my homeboys, like yes, we were part of this group, and then people called us that gang. That kind of we just took on that image.
Okay.
Several
But at
of
this
them
time, you weren't in an official gang. You were just kind of running with a crew.
Well, I mean, we were an official gang. I mean, but it started not as an official gang, but people knew it's that group, and suddenly
Okay.
we put our name, and suddenly, yeah. So it is. I mean, all intents and purposes, it
Yeah.
is a gang.
And
Yeah.
how many guys were in this?
Maybe 25,
Okay.
30. It wasn't a big crew, but I mean, it was a
Yeah.
very violent. It was a very violent group. I mean, like, yeah, that group of us were very violent in
But-
the Orange County area.
But you also have this really good job at this point, it seems.
Yeah, I actually had a job at the Gallup organization. This is before the fame of their strength finder studies and all that stuff. I was already working there at Gallup before the first violation, and then when I went inside, I can't remember who let them know, like, hey, I had a family emergency, I had to leave, and they just told them I was out of state. So when I got out in 1998, I went back and reapplied, and they brought me back in. And that year I was given their 1998 Interviewer of the Year award. I got to do all kinds of studies. But back then they had the Gallup polls, so that's what they were known for. But then they also had a lot of other marketing research and different studies. So I got to do studies for the Department of Justice. I was doing studies for. I actually got to do the exit interviews for the Microsoft engineers as they left Microsoft. I was one of 4 interviewers nationwide that were doing those exit interviews. So that was amazing. Getting to talk to such amazing people and picking out like what they liked about their work, and then compiling that and giving that feedback to the team at Microsoft. So yeah, I got to do that. But but then once again, there's always a part of me felt like I'm not sure where I'm going to go with this. So it was that year after I got the 1998 Interview of the Year, they had asked me to apply for the management position at Gallup. And at the time, that would have been managing the Irvine location. It was over 300 interviewers. So it'd be me and like 3 or 4 other managers. We'd be managing 300, a whole call center of 300 interviewers. So I did the interview, which at Gallup, the interview is not an actual interview. They call you on the phone and it's a personality test. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's a total personality test. Like, what do you think about when you drive home at night? What color do you think of it? And they did the whole test. I was so excited. I was like, you know what? Finally, for once in my life, these things are gonna go right. Like it's gonna work out. I was in college, and then I said, okay, I'll be graduating the following year. I love computers. I love tech. So I was taking. I think my major at the time was information systems, management information systems. I say, I don't know what I'm gonna do with this, but I'm gonna be able to do something with this and with this management job. So
things are finally coming together.
Yep, things are gonna finally work out for once in my life. And they came back. I think it was like 4 or 6 weeks after the interview, and they just said, you know what, Quan, we're so sorry, but you are not a fit. And and that's just their language. That's their exact words, is how they say their personalities, that people are not a fit, because they look at positions and personality. But for me, it was just not a fit. Wait, I still don't fit in. I still don't fit in after all these years. Yep, I knew I don't fit in. So I just that same day, I remember I did not tell my girlfriend about it. I didn't tell my family about it. I just went down, got drunk at the bar, and then within a week and a half, I went up to this nightclub up in Hollywood, going up there with some of my gang associates, and I came out of the club that night, and I found out some of them had gotten into a fight with a different group, a different gang. So I orchestrated an ambush and followed them on the freeway for about 20, 25 miles. And I ended up shooting and killing one man and injuring three others in the car. Yeah.
How did you feel after that?
I didn't feel, I wouldn't say I felt anything. If there was anything to feel, it probably at that time would have been the sense of, you know, I may have failed in this part of my life, but in this part of my life, this is where I will not fail, and this is where I'll gain recognition, and this is where basically here's an achievement that finally. So if
there's
anything,
power, there's significance.
And it is disgusting and sick to say now, but I probably would have to say I most likely felt proud. Like, yes, I got them. Especially the next day when I found out, okay, somebody died, and now what? Okay, let's get rid of the gun. Let's get rid of evidence.
Was that the first time you ever killed anyone?
That's not the first time I shot anyone, but that was the first time it was like, you know, like, and then there's a weird thing. Like I see it on the news now when, that's why like the irony of what I see happen now, like when somebody is like an officer shoots somebody and they say, okay, I saw him reaching for something, or I thought, but I know what a gun in your hand can do, that sense of power. And in my mind, I had played it over and over. I'm going to shoot and kill somebody. I'm going to shoot. And like, so I had been involved with numerous shootings, but so I think just the split second, okay, well, this is what you do. And it's just so, I see now when people just fall back, oh no, it's my life or theirs. It was, yeah, it's that power that I would have to say the ugliness and the evilness of what a gun can do.
You said proud. Did it feel like an achievement?
I would have to say yes.
Yeah. It's amazing just reading that scene in your book. Again, I think your book is so cinematic. I mean, I could feel myself driving down the 405 in that high speed chase. But then it was amazing to see right afterwards, you go home and there's a really sweet scene where you tuck your mother into bed and you wanted to make sure she was safe. And again, it just shows that, you know, you were this professional that was about to get a managerial job at a well-regarded organization. Then you're in this gang, you're high-speed chase down the 405 freeway, firing out of a speeding car, killing someone, and then going home and making sure your mother is tucked away in bed. I mean, it was just it was amazing just to see the face of this person at the time and how you were going in and out of being this really sweet guy to this violent gang member. And as you tell your story, it makes a lot of sense about that wasn't your default state, but you needed a place of acceptance, you needed a place of significance, you needed a place of belonging, it seemed like, and that's where you got it.
Yeah.
So afterwards you feel like I achieved something, right? I'm accepted. I'm now truly one of these people because that's what these people do, and now I'm one of them. You find out someone died. What do you do immediately after?
I broke down a gun, got rid of it. Then there were a couple people that were involved in the group that knew what had happened. So I started talking to them like, hey, so because there was a different car that they were following that was had some women in the car that I knew, and the women didn't like. I guess they found out, and like, so one of them was panicking. She's like, "Oh my God, the police raided my house." I just told her, I go, okay, and she said, and they asked if I knew you guys, and I said, what? And they asked if we saw anything, and I said, okay, did you see anything? And she said, no. I go, okay, then what's the problem? But it was like, because when the shooting happened, I thought for sure they heard in the other car what had happened. They didn't know. The other car did not know I had done the shooting. So when that happened, I didn't feel the need to tell them about it. But then when the police raided her house, I had to talk to her, and I said, look, do you know anything? And she goes, no. I go, then don't you want to leave it that way? You don't want to know anything, right? And she goes, yeah. Then I go, just leave it at that. Then if they ever come, just plead the fifth.
So
And
did you think you were good?
I thought I was good because I thought, okay, I coached them all. I did everything and I got rid of evidence. And about 5 months later, they did a gang raid and took in a bunch of us. And one of my the occupants in my car, one of my own homeboys, became state's evidence and gave up the information.
Were you involved in that raid?
Yes.
You were. Okay, so you got picked up along with all of your buddies. And are they interrogating you about what happened?
They actually didn't even interrogate me. They interrogated a few people, and once he gave up all the information, said that I was the shooter, I just know that I was transferred up to, like, they let a bunch of people go because they were investigating several shootings, and then I started seeing them let people go. So then,
but they rounded you up just purely on reputation.
Well, they knew I was part of this game, and they had a suspicion that I was most likely involved in the shooting in Los Angeles, but they weren't sure. They just knew our group was involved. They didn't know who exactly. So when they took us in, and one of my homeboys at the time gave up a bunch of information, is when I remember asking the deputy, like, "Hey, when am I getting released? Nobody's talked to me." And they looked. They said, "Oh, you're not going nowhere. You got a case up in Los Angeles." So when they said that, I was like, "Oh crap." So when I went to Los Angeles, they transferred me to Los Angeles. I went to court on a Monday, and that's when they said that they were trying me for the death penalty. That's when I first found out.
And when you first found out, what went through your head?
I remember thinking, what evidence do they have? And then my attorney at the time, who was just a state defender, I said, and he had some paperwork. I go, "What evidence do they have?" He goes, "Oh, they have somebody saying that you did the shoot." I said, "Who is it?" And he goes, they redacted the name. I said, "Can we get to that page?" And when I read it, I was like,
Yeah.
They already blacked his name up. I knew exactly who it was. I was like,
And were you blaming the person who
oh yeah, like when that came in, instead of like, you know what, I shot and killed a human being. That was awful. That was terrible. I should never done this. Like, okay, let's plead guilty. It was more, I had got away. This piece of crap told on me. And plus, if I didn't do it, then it would have been my life or theirs. These guys shouldn't have messed with this. That's what they get. Why are they telling? And why is he telling? So it's blaming him, blaming the other, because the other gang members also told. They just didn't know who I was, but they did say, yeah, it was this. And then suddenly when they did the photo lineups, they said, yeah, we think he's the one that did the shooting, which is impossible. I know that part. I'm pretty sure he was coached on the other end by the district attorneys, but that's not the big deal here. It was just at the time I took it.
But you're blaming everyone else but you.
Yeah.
How did you feel from a betrayal standpoint? Because here's one of your homeboys. This is your crew that you finally have gained acceptance in your life, and now he's snitching on you.
Yep. Oh, I was angry. I was like, I don't believe this happened. I hope he gets arrested and comes onto the main line here. So there's like all these things going through my head. Like, and then I think, okay, how am I gonna get away with this still?
Yeah.
How can I beat this case?
So did you plead guilty?
No, I didn't plead guilty. I went to trial. It took about 1.5 years, 2 years to bring me to trial. I got on the stand, and
the whole time you're saying to your attorney, like, I didn't do it.
Yep. So I said, I didn't do it. He's lying. And then he said, like, well, why is he lying? I said, well, he's just trying to save his own ass. In fact, he's the one that did the shooting. I was in the backseat. And it was like, we flipped the whole script. I knew stuff that he would lie about, like little things. He had the same car as me, but it was just a whole bunch of little things. I just knew him as a person. I knew what stuff he would lie about. So I let my attorney know. And we kind of, we flipped it all around on him at court. And the jury actually believed that I was not the trigger man.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So did you get off?
They found me guilty under the felony murder rule, which is regardless, like the DA had argued, regardless if you think Quan did this shooting or not, he's there under the felony murder rule, by the way, which has been overturned and it's been ruled unconstitutional. So he's there, he's just as guilty. So that's how they found me guilty under the felony murder rule.
Was everyone guilty?
No, they only took me to trial. They only took me to trial. They did not know who the driver was, and I think they were, because they always knew that there was something shady about my homeboy, the one that gave the information. So I think they were afraid if they went after who else was in my car. If they did not give the same story, that means their main witness on this was not going to be too, what is it? Too,
Credible.
yeah, too credible.
Yeah. So they wanted someone to be put away, and they wanted this case closed.
Yeah.
And you were the one they got you on it. So done, case closed. Yeah. We got them. Okay.
And plus, I had the record for it. I had everything leading. So this is for them. Yep. Yeah. This is an open shut case. This is
job well done. We're done. Yeah. Okay. But you actually were the trigger man.
Yes, I was.
Okay.
Absolutely. But even after I was found guilty, then I filed my appeals and I went into the prison system. I never once admitted to being trigger man. Like even when psychologists interviewed me, I said I didn't do this. Why I shouldn't be here. So all of that played into my own journey inside prison for like 10, 12 years.
Wow. 10, 12 years you held that.
Yeah. Just that script I told in my head. Like I should never have done this. Like, of course I knew I did do it, but I never told anyone. Yeah. Like, I don't trust anybody around me no more. I got betrayed from my own homie. So if anyone asked me, I don't want to talk about it, but no.
And then what was the sentencing?
15 years to life, which in California was the same as a death sentence anyway. They had not paroled anybody since 1977 on a life sentence at that time.
So your expectation is when you find out 15 years to life, but most likely it's life, you're thinking, I'm going to appeal this, I'm going to get off.
Well, I was hoping like, okay, I'm going to appeal. Hopefully I get off because I think that's the only thing part of it that kept me saying like, okay, if not, what am I supposed to die in my prison? Yeah. And I didn't face that. But then my appeal gets shot down, and I think that was in 2002 or 2003 when I found out that's it. So at that time, it's like, okay, hopefully some type of law changes. That's like something at the back of my mind.
So so you're in there for a couple of years, and then you're finally giving up on the appeal. So after a couple of years, you're thinking, I'm in here unless a law changes.
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna die unless the law changes.
And at that point, you're still blaming everyone else but you.
Yep.
That must have been a dark place to be.
Yeah, it was an absolutely dark place to be.
So I mean, like, how did you spend your time? I mean, what was prison like during that time?
I started to find my exercise and playing sports that actually helped pass my time.
Wait, was that right away? Did you gravitate towards that?
Well, I did enjoy exercising, and I guess partly also in prison, you have to be in good shape just in case there's a fight, and you don't. So and then plus you have to take care of yourself, especially if I'm gonna die in prison. Most of the lifers, they take care of themselves. For some reason, I think that's a way to deny the state of I'm not gonna die in prison and just try to live as long as possible and exercise, take care of themselves. Yeah.
So you found an escape through exercise, but you're still angry. You still feel the betrayal. You're still blaming everyone else but you. And you said this is now 10 years into it, and you're still in that state. Like, did you accept the fact that, okay, I'm in prison for life now?
Oh yeah, I think by that time I had accepted, and I said, I'm gonna die in prison. So I'm just gonna live the way I want. So I was still involved with the black market. I was involved with the tobacco, the drug trade, the contraband cell phones. I was involved with all of that.
Was there a Vietnamese crew in prison?
Yeah, so we usually hang out by race, and so I think by that time I was at Solano State Prison. I mean, it's in prison. There's a lot of, people live by hustling. So my hustle was running the parlay tickets. My hustle was getting connections for tobacco and drugs, and how do we bring in cell phones, because this is the lifeline for people to pass their time in here. Yeah. And we're all lifers, so I figured, like, I remember I had some family members and some close friends, like, they begged me, like, oh, what are you doing? You're just gonna get in trouble. I said, what's gonna happen? What are they gonna do? Like, they're gonna put me in the hole, and then then what? I'm gonna die here anyway. Just let me live my life.
So, like, what was your headspace at that time?
Selfishness, arrogance.
Were you angry?
I was very angry, and I did not realize it until after my process of transformation. Because I always thought the angry person is the one that screams or yells or cannot control their emotions. I never realized the angry person is the one also that didn't know how to process their emotions. I mean, I was angry that I got turned down for the management job at Gallup, but I never thought I was angry because I never talked to anyone about it, and I just shoved it into a dark corner, and I ended up shooting and killing a human being for it. So I was very angry at the time, and I just saw someone that I could take my anger out on, but I didn't realize it at the time. So I didn't realize any of this even up until 10, 12 years into my sentence. I never looked at myself as angry, because if someone says something to me, okay, I don't say anything back or I don't argue with them. We just, okay, now I wait for them to give me an opportunity to attack them and just say, oh yeah, well, he was disrespectful. He called me out my name, or he said something stupid, so I have to beat him up or whatever. And that was justifiable in the prison world. And never thinking I was angry.
But so I've gotten to know you just a little bit over the last year or so, and I would say that my impression of you has always been this really open, vulnerable, sweet, thoughtful guy. So at some point there was a shift.
Yeah.
And so you're 10, 12 years in, but then something changes. So what changes? How did you go from where you were at that point of someone looking for acceptance, of someone who was angry, as someone that found their significance through being a gang member, to then going through this transformation? What was that first step?
Well, one of my other escapes from prison was books. I've always been a bookworm. I've been known to read multiple books simultaneously, and at my bunk area, you'll see like 5 or 6 books. Walking out of the law library, I always have books. And I always loved like business books or entrepreneur books, and so that's what I was always reading. But for some reason, during that time, I became very fascinated with books on the saints, especially ones that spoke about shared their stories of before they became saints, of how they were also very flawed, and details their failures. Those were the ones I really gravitated to. And
Can you name some of them?
yeah, like Saint Francis of Assisi. Before he created the Franciscan order, I mean, his family came from wealth. I think they were merchants, and I think there are some reports that him and some of his friends on a drunken night killed somebody, but because of his family's influence and money, they just paid it off, and he got right out of prison. He wasn't even in prison, so he got right out. Was Saint Ignatius of Loyola. I mean, he created the Jesuits. I mean, like even if you look at Saint Paul, who originally started as Saul, who was persecuting and killing Christians. I mean, he probably was responsible for I don't know how many murders, but yeah.
Do you identify as a Christian now?
Yes. Today I choose to practice my faith as a Roman Catholic again, after I came full circle.
Yeah, I was going to say, so when you picked up the book on the saints, did you consider yourself a Christian at that point?
No, it was just interesting reading for me. I think it was interesting to see, wow, how did these guys create this? And then I think there was a part of me, because during that time, my grandfather passed away. My niece had been born, and the first pictures of her, she looked like a spitting image of like my brother as a little boy, like when he was first born. It just reminded me of taking me back to my childhood, and just seeing like like, oh my gosh, she looks just like my brother. And then just me thinking, damn, how did I end up in this place? Like, is this what my life is meant to be? And then reflecting and contrasting, especially on my father's life, 35, 38 years on earth, and remembering his funeral and how many people that he had impacted in his time on earth, and contrasting that with myself, and seeing like, how did I leave such a path of like death and destruction behind me, and pain.
So all of that happened right before you picked up the book on the Saints.
Yeah, I think like these were just all things that were going on, like, and then selling these books on the Saints. So I think that's what fed into my curiosity of these books. And
But it's really interesting though too, because so much of the start of your destruction started around the time of your first communion and your father dying and you almost feeling betrayed by God at that point.
yeah,
And then that starts this path of destruction. But it was almost like picking up that book. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. I'm trying to read into it too much. But from an outside observer, it almost seems like this is almost reconnecting back to your faith that you abandoned back at the age
yeah.
of 13.
I would have to say that's exactly how I saw the transition later on. I mean, during that time though, it was just I was curious. I think I was also working. I was also reading a bunch of books on personal development. So I was also very interested in that and where choice had how each of us has our own choice in everything, and that was very empowering. So all these came together, I guess, in a perfect storm.
Yeah. What made you pick up a book on personal development?
There was because a lot of the business books, like, so I used to like to read business books, and I'm always looking at the Wall Street Journal, and then I look at their top books. So I usually find books I like, and I request them.
But I'm just like interested because like here's a guy who's like life in prison. It's like, why do you care?
I like business books, and I like, and then I also like his personal development books. So it's just
Interesting.
plus I
Yeah.
like reading. So
Yeah.
just,
I'm looking at this and I'm thinking the fact that you're reading these books, I think there's just like there's that little boy inside of you that's still like, I'm gonna make something of myself and I can do this.
yeah. Well, I guess the books helped me to escape, and it helped me to continue to feed my dreams. That's the only way to describe that
Love
part
it.
of it.
I think it's beautiful, man. But there was also just something, there's a faith inside of you. There had to have been.
Hmm. Oh yeah, I'm sure it was there, but I think it was clouded by my anger towards my father's death and my grief and not processing yet at that time. Um, but then yeah, so all these books tie in with everything at that time, and it's just I don't know, it just started to become like I became more reflective, and then I like books on like mindfulness and meditation, and so it just happened to be one day on the yard. I stood out there and looking around, and I had just done my meditation that morning, and I just remember thinking like, why do I have to look at prison as punishment? Why can't I view this place as a way for me to remake myself? And that's when I realized, you know what, I can. Like, even if I'm supposed to die in here, why can't I build a legacy and follow in the path of the saints and try to leave some type of imprint of goodness on the world? And just that subtle shift in thinking, and I tell you one that made all the difference in the world for me right there is when the sun was coming up over that hills that morning. On the little blades of grass, I saw the individual drops of dew, and above me in the razor wire, I heard a sparrow chirping. And yeah, and I tell people it's probably been chirping my whole prison term. I did not hear it, but that day I heard it, and that day is where prison did not feel like a place of like cold, harsh ugliness. It became like, you know, a place where I could connect with other human beings, see them as like they're on their journey, I'm on my journey. Many of them further along, some of them still lost and lonely, but we were all on our journey, and that's where my process of transformation began. You know, first with grieving, finally starting to grieve my father's death 25 years after, and then seeing a therapist for it, and then reading books on grief and loss and getting fascinated with that. And then I actually put a syllabus together that I submitted to the prison psychologist, and we created the prison's first men's grief and loss group, because I realized grief and loss is in many forms. It's not just losing, it's not just death, it's loss. And I saw it all around me, men losing their dreams of their youth, or changing prisons, or losing family members that don't want to talk to them anymore, or losing friendships because they were just uprooted from one prison to another. And so there was no way for any of these men to process it. So it was cool to do that first group and see the impact I was making. And suddenly I saw, like, in this little part of my world on this prison yard, I can make an impact and I could do something. And suddenly this most alive I had ever felt in my whole life. And yeah, so then I started, how else can I make an impact? What else can I do to help others around me? And, especially feeling this inner sense of freedom and guys around me, I felt like I knew this secret that I wanted to share, and people thought I was, then, but yet people probably think I'm crazy, or I'm trying to explain and it's not working well, and then tying it in with all these personal development books, and so everything just came together at that time. Um,
And did your
yeah,
fellow inmates take to this community?
once once we started, yes. I mean, like, by the time I paroled in 2015, so this is like what, 5 years after, um, there had been quite a movement of men inside creating a community to change that culture. I mean, I got involved with this group called the Alternatives to Violence Project, and I saw what our work did on that prison yard to change it from a culture of like anger and violence and hatred to one of, like, of peace
Uh-huh.
and dignity and honoring each other's journey. Of course there were still people that were outside it, but we were able to affect our little small part of the community in there.
It's amazing. Were there some common themes among the community when it came to grieving, when it came to loss, when it came to how they were processing this loss?
Yeah, because I think just the culture of prison, also with or gender, men are, believe they cannot cry. Men believe they cannot process something or even talk about feelings. So it was all of that tied together, and then being able to understand part of that, and gain some emotional literacy, and once again reading more books on that, and just using that as the tie-in to further understand and then to incorporate. Because for me, prison during that time, reading these books and coming up with these great, like reading from amazing thought leaders and things like that, but then using what they're telling me, and me writing down these notes and then applying it each day. Like I look at, oh, I want to try apply what does personal responsibility in my life look like, and I try to apply it and move into somebody else, and then so all of these lessons that I'm reading, but I get to use it in prison because it becomes a fishbowl for me to test out all these things I want to make of myself and how to make myself a better person. So every day became for me, here is how I can make myself better today. So many times I failed. Like I get in an argument, I say something stupid, or in my mind I say something stupid, and then I go back, start over. I have to forgive myself, and I write down my journal. Okay, this is where I liked what I did today. This is where I failed. Being okay with that word failure for once, though, and just being very intentional in writing that word, and then just going through it, and then this is how I want to improve. And so
I
then
love
after
it.
that, I'm not afraid of failure. Like
Yeah.
failure is part of the journey, and
Yeah.
yeah.
But you make a really good point though, because this wasn't you didn't read the books and have the experience that you had with the sparrow and the razor wire and say, I'm cured. I got this. Right? It's a practice.
I wish it was that easy. Yeah.
Right. And I mean, how about today? Do you feel yourself getting triggered and feeling anger come about
I mean,
today?
I think back to during that time, I think that was probably when I felt the most in alignment. Even, yes, I'm in prison, yes, I'm doing a life sentence, but I felt most in alignment and fulfilled with where I was with my purpose in life inside prison. Like now I'm out here, I have my book, I have my company, I'm able to make an impact and help men and women that are still inside. But there are days I still, like, I miss the solitude and the peacefulness of being in alignment with, okay, this is my purpose. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be at this point, and I get to do God's work here, and I
Mm-hmm.
get to, be like what does Saint Francis say? Like, be an instrument of His peace.
It's fascinating. I mean, the fact that you gained inner freedom inside prison.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, and I'll bring a point back that we were talking about earlier with respect to college and how you were going back to school, but it was more or less to kind of serve out your your mother's desire to see you walk across stage. And the reason I thought that was an interesting point, I wanted to bring it back at this point, is now you have that inner freedom where, well, you want to do right by your family and you want people to be proud of you. You're more you you're more focused on getting your inner peace. And if
Yeah.
college provides that for you, great. If it doesn't, you don't need it because you're running a successful business, and you'd only be doing it for somebody else. And as much as you can love other people while still doing what's right for you.
Yep. And I can still love them and assertively draw my boundaries and tell them, you know what, I'm sorry, I love you, yet this is not serving it. And it's
Because
I think it's a very uncomfortable situation for people that it's weird because I came home and I realized, you know what? A lot of people out here have not had the opportunity that I had to work on myself, have not had an opportunity to practice a lot of, nonviolent communication or what is effective communication or how to draw healthy boundaries. So when I'm drawing my boundaries and being assertive, suddenly it can make people around me that have not done this work feel uncomfortable in some ways. And I had to be okay with that too, especially when it's,
yeah,
yeah.
I think you make a beautiful point there, and I think it's spot on in that there are so many people that I see and know on a day-to-day basis that have never been in prison, but are the most imprisoned people I
Mhm.
know. And they're imprisoned by expectations, they're imprisoned by ego, they're imprisoned by fear. I work in the wealth management business, and I've worked with billionaire families before, and they are some of the most imprisoned people I've ever met in my life,
Mhm.
and their kids and grandkids, etc. And it's really interesting to again to see your inner peace and your freedom that you get in prison, where people on the outside, people who are living a free life, spend their entire life in a prison of self-creation.
Oh yeah. Well, I think like I used to call it like the narrative because I used to see it firsthand. It's the narrative that we've told ourselves over the years, and so I'll see a man that said he did not do this, and then later on read his transcripts, and what he said and what he said happened in the board hearing are two totally different things. And that's when I started seeing what part of me is telling a narrative that is not true to reality,
Wow.
but I am trying to shape and warp the world around it, and then become angry when someone points it out to me. And I saw it happen over and over. And where do I need to grow in that aspect? So, yeah, so I look at those as lessons for myself to become better, but yet I see that is the vast majority of people sometimes in prison that are stuck there. And then I also see it out here.
Yeah.
There's a script, there's a narrative that
Yeah.
they've told, and you know, sometimes sometimes if it's reflected back to them, they can become angry or defensive or.
So let's kind of round out this prison experience. At what point then? So you have this transformation. At what point do you say, like, I was a trigger man?
The very first time I stepped into the board hearing, by that time I had started coaching men before they went to the parole board. Inside prison, they have these parole hearing transcripts where it's verbatim what happens, and these transcripts are very private. Nobody shares their transcripts with each other. For some reason, though, one of my friends let me read his transcripts. He had like 7 or 8 of them. That means each hearing he goes to, they issue the transcript. It's like 120 pages, and it's and when I read it, I suddenly thought, wait, I think I know why they're not letting him out. And I think they're not looking, they don't care if you did this. I think they're just seeing if you've changed in some way. And it tied in with everything that I had been reading with
Mhm.
personal responsibility and making choices. And, by that time I had also been facilitating victims awareness, and I was reading, I was very fascinated with restorative justice movement and things like that. So everything tied in, I go, this is what it is. So I started sitting down to coach him. And that's when people really thought I was crazy, because then they said, like, what are you and Quan doing in the day room? And the guy tells him, oh, Quan's helping me prepare for the board. So they said, how can Quan help you prepare for the board when he's never gone to the board? The guy's only been in prison 11, 12 years, and all these guys around have been in like 30, 40 years. But I started helping him. Then one of my other friends sit down. My friend goes to the parole board, is found suitable. And suddenly that's when guys wanted to sit with me, like, what's going on here? Which is fine. Like for me, I
Interesting.
go, I know why they want to sit is because they want to go home. And that's perfectly fine because I know what I want to do is, yes, I can help them go home, but I want to help them become free and share this freedom I already have, and this is my opportunity to do it. And not only my opportunity, but I think it's my obligation to. This is how I
Wow.
can act, and this is how I can help. So that's how. When my coaching was always with them, it's funny because I say the word coaching. I didn't know what is coaching. It was just work prep, and hey, this is where I think I can help you.
And you
So,
hadn't gone through the process yourself. You just studied it through the transcripts.
yeah, I studied and then tying it in because I'd never gone to the board, but understanding the transcripts.
Wow.
I think maybe that's what helped because I came at it with a fresh perspective. Like my I didn't know what happened in there, but because of everything I was reading of, all these other books that just made me like, this is what I think they're looking for. And basically it's just the universal principle of how do you express remorse and
Wow.
and what is amends looks like. And so I
That's
started coaching.
amazing.
And that's what happened. So I mean I saw during that time, like during those 5 years when I helped maybe 8, 10, 12 guys get found suitable and go home, which is
Amazing.
it's not an insignificant amount. It's not at all. And I think
Not at all.
but then in realizing every time I go back into prison and guys find out that I was a lifer, they come, they ask me, how did you go home? Oh, this is what the board told me, and I hear them and I hear their words and I hear how they're describing the world, and I go, I could help this guy. Or this one tells me, and I go, I know exactly what's going on in his mind right here. He needs this shift to own this part, and he should be good on his way. And that was a lot of the motivation when I was doing the book. I go, here's a way. I can't go back in to help every single one, but here's a way that I could lay out
Wow.
and be able to help them to come to their freedom.
That's from. I mean, it's truly remarkable. So but at this point, you weren't even up for parole.
No, I was not going up for parole for another few years when I started the process.
And did you have any idea or hope that maybe you'd get out someday?
Well, of course I hope. By that time,
Yeah.
I already had this freedom, so it's more like, I don't care if I'm gonna die. Like this is. So I went to the board the first time. I got parole. I got denied 5 years. This was 2013. I was denied 5 years. The minimum denial is a 3. So getting a 5 meant because of my write-ups, because I had a bunch of write-ups. So everybody on the yard well, not everybody, that's generalized, but a lot of the naysayers on the yard said, see, if Quan knew what he was doing, he would have got a 3-year denial, or he would have got a date. You guys are stupid to listen to him. And that was where then I got a letter from my aunt, who basically, my dad's sister, the one that I told you earlier, has also asked me to get in. And she basically told me, because she's always been a researcher. Like to this day, she'll send emails and like, oh, I looked this up and da da da. And she'll give like different things. I love her to death for that. But I think what she researched, how many lifetime prisoners get out of California, and it was something less than 1%.
Yeah.
So she basically said, I don't want you to put all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah. Get your hopes up. Yeah.
Get your hopes up, and and of course, like I know when I got the letter, I was really hurt. It just felt like, damn, my own family doesn't believe in me, and I know their intentions were good, and I know her intention was not to ever say like she doesn't believe in me, but that's just how it felt to me.
Did that make you lose hope?
No, it just made me feel like, you know what? And I wrote her a letter and I told her, you know what? I'm not crazy. I'm not putting all my eggs in one basket.
Yeah.
I found my freedom already.
Wow.
And, but what I'm saying is, if I don't believe in myself, then whoever will. So I believe that I can go home, and I go. And as a matter of fact, it's 2013. The parole board gave me a 5-year denial. I guarantee you, I will be home before 2018. I just told her that, and like now they say about the power of manifesting.
Yeah.
I wrote that down. I said, I guarantee I will be home before 2018. So, and I understood the board process. So there was this paperwork that you could file to advance your hearing. You could do it once every 3 years, and most it's standard. Like like it's funny because in prison they say, well, everyone knows that, and so like everybody in prison knew that you have to wait at least 3 years to do it. And I questioned, I was like, why do we have to wait 3 years? Where does it say distinguished? But yet they say no, that's what you have to do, and it just almost becomes common knowledge. So And I questioned that. So at the I think 14 months, I filed my paperwork to advance my hearing. They granted it. The naysayers, of course, said, oh, they're granted it because they're going to bring you in and deny you. That means you can't even file this for another 3 years, and they deny you 5 years. You end up doing 8 years. Why did you do this? And for me, it's like, no, I've addressed everything they said, and I put that paperwork in. They granted it. They brought me back in, and they found me suitable in my second hearing.
It's amazing.
They said, you're no longer a threat to society. So, yeah, I got out in 2015.
So much to talk about here. Just a couple of points here. Number one, it's really interesting how you get that letter from your aunt, and you compare that to being in the Model UN and having your dream at that point was to get to West Point. Your dream now is to be released. And going back to the West Point dream, someone tells you you're not going to get into West Point, and it becomes a crushing blow. You believe it, right? So then you lose faith in your ability to do that. Versus here you are now, you found the inner peace, you found the inner, you are already free, and you have someone that deals you a crushing blow in terms of what could be a crushing blow to your hopes. And you say, that's not true. I don't care if there's a one. There's less of a chance you would get out than you would gotten into West Point. But for some reason, you kept going. And that's got to be the inner peace. And I think it's interesting because kind of going back to your coaching, it's interesting how like your approach in terms of helping your fellow inmates get that inner peace, get that accountability, get that vulnerability, and have that come through to the parole board versus a quick hack in terms of this is what they're going to want to see, so this is what you give them. It was like, no, you believe it, you get it inside of you, and it's going to come out versus just figuring out what they want to hear.
Yeah. And I think by that time, that's why I think since that time, I'm always very mindful of the words that come out of my mouth, but then I also hear what people say and how they describe things that happen in their world. And it gives me a very good understanding of how they see it, whether this person comes from a place of empowerment and understanding, or a place of like, they're still blaming and victimhood and thinking like the world screwed them over. And I can catch that usually within a couple minutes. I go, I'm not even training this to catch this. I'm sure the parole board, when they see trained to get this, they know this already.
Totally, 100%. So I have to ask before I forget. You mentioned, this goes back to the personal development books. What's one personal development book that you recommend?
Let me see. One I like is there's a few. Let me see. Sensible Self-Help by Grunemeyer. There's The Road Less Traveled. Even 7 Habits.
The Road Less Traveled. Who's that by?
M. Scott Peck.
Okay.
The psychologist. I really like that one. Let me see. What other ones? Emotional Intelligence by Goleman. Even Jim Collins' Good to Great. I read that one. Even though that's a business book, I looked at how to build a great company, but I looked how do you build a great personality or a great person. Make yourself a great person. Because those same lessons are applied there. That's how I read that book.
And it sounds like probably a bunch of biographies. Bill Gates.
I like a lot of different biographies. Yeah, well, I mean, but most of my favorite ones, like one of my heroes that I love reading about was actually Mother Teresa. I like reading a bunch of stuff about her. Yeah,
I love it. So you get out in 2015, and what happens as soon as you get out?
Went right to work. At my brother's real estate company the next day. Well, the very next morning, they take me into a core power yoga, a hot yoga studio, and I went to yoga for the very first time.
Well, who took you there?
My brother and my sister-in-law. So I didn't, and I didn't know most of the yoga moves, so I have to look around. But I felt so uncomfortable looking at all the women with all the and then I just remember thinking I shouldn't look, but I have to look to figure out what I'm doing because I don't know what move. And yet I'm uncomfortable. Yeah, there was too many women around. Yeah, so I went right to work.
Yeah, and here you are today. So let's talk about the book for a second. So Sparrow in the Razor Wire. I'm going to share a screen. I don't have a, where'd it go? I won't be able to share it. I'll share it when I do the introduction. But Sparrow in the Razor Wire, it's coming out when?
September 15th.
September 15th. And who is this book for?
It's written for the men I left behind. Men that are doing long or life-term sentences. I'm sharing with them how did I come to my sense of inner freedom like years before I paroled. But one thing I did make sure to write it is because I noticed when I got involved with groups and workshops and facilitating work, there were facilitators that came from a place of lecturing and teaching, but I always found men resonated with me more when I shared my own vulnerabilities. So that's the way I wrote the book. It was almost like, this is what I saw, this is what I experienced, this is what I felt, and this is what happened, whether good or bad. That's the way I continue. I never wrote it from like, you need to do this, and let me tell you a lesson. That's the way I wrote it.
I mean, in every copy that's sold, one's donated to the prison, right?
Yeah. So for launch week, we have bulk sales for every book that's sold. I'm matching it and donating it to a person in prison.
It's a truly amazing story. I really appreciate you sharing this with the world. I've read the chapters you've released so far. I think you've released around 6 or so. And as soon as I start, I can't stop myself. So I cannot wait to finish this entire book. And I really want to thank you for sharing your story today. For someone who, I just want to end with, what would you say for somebody who is going through an experience like the younger Quan, where you're looking for acceptance, where you're looking for community, where you're looking for significance? And it might be someone who's in middle school, someone who's in high school, someone in college, or an adult. What would you say? What advice would you give to that person?
Well, I'm not sure if I would give advice. Maybe I just ask them, like, what do they want? Where do they want to go? What do they want to do? Like, instead of, because I remember I was told, I wasn't asked what I wanted to do. It was more like, you're going to West Point, you're going to do this, you're going to college, you're going to do this. But never once, what about, like, what was important to me?
Mm-hmm. If you could go back and ask the 13-year-old Quan, what do you want? What would that 13-year-old Quan say?
He probably would have said, I don't know. Well, you know what? He probably would have said he wants to write. Actually, yeah, because I did love to write. Up until my father passed away, I loved writing. And it wasn't until, 20-something, 30 years later when I'm in prison, in my life sentence, that I started writing again.
Quan, I know this book is going to do really well. I can't wait to buy it. I can't wait to read the entire thing. If people want to connect with you, how can they do so?
They could connect with me on my website, quanxhuynh.com. I could give you that, or they can find me on all of the social media. It's all of them the same, at Quan X Huynh.
Can you spell that out?
Yep, QUANX and then HUYNH.
Perfect. I'll put it in the show notes as well. Quan, thanks so much, man.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, we did it. Episode 2 is in the books. What'd you think? Quan's a really special guy, right? If you want to learn more about Quan, pick up his book, Sparrow in the Razor Wire. I'm going to leave a link to the book in the show notes, as well as ways to connect with Quan to the extent that you want to do so after this show. If you enjoyed this episode and if you're getting a lot out of it, please subscribe to the podcast and leave us a review. It really helps getting your feedback to just know what's working, what's not working. And if you think your friends would benefit from this, please share it on social media and let us know what you think. All right. With that, thank you so much for joining us on episode number 2 of Take the Next Step. I hope you join us next week for episode 3. Next week's going to be a story about entrepreneurship, about grit, resiliency, toughness, and taking the next step to build a brand. All right, that, I'll see you next week.